Hello, and welcome to another episode of IgG4-RD Life. We are your hosts. I am Mahsa, and this is Alex.
Hi. Yes, this is a podcast where we talk about the lived experience of patients with IgG4 related disease. We talk to patients, experts, and other allies, such as caregivers and advocates of other rare diseases.
And today we are actually going to be talking about flares and relapses, just to see kind of what our different types of flares look like and, what sets it aside and, differentiates it from the relapse that we go through uh, usually before our infusions. So, with that being said, actually, Alex, I'll ask you a question. So, what do you, in your opinion, what do you think a flare is?
Well, for me, for the longest time, I really just felt that a flare was just a reoccurrence of some of the symptoms that I had when I originally came down with this disease and was diagnosed. I also, some additional things that had come up, like jaw pain, headaches, fatigue. Mostly it's the deep fatigue. That to me is what I would consider a flare, as feeling a lot of fatigue. And by that, I mean, because a lot of people don't fully understand fatigue unless they've experienced it. So it's hard to describe, but I liken it to, and I think I've spoken about this before, where if you go to one of these really fun science centers with the kids, and you have these places where you weigh yourself on Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and these planets with greater mass pull you down more heavily. So I describe my fatigue as like being on Jupiter, and you don't necessarily feel those weights in the science places, but you can see that suddenly you're like 5,000 tons or whatever. And that's what it feels like. You have to drag yourself out of bed. It's really hard. You're taking a lot of naps, and also just for me, recurrence of any symptoms like blindness and whatever. Yeah.
So, how long do you think that, or how long would you say your flares last, right? So, if you're having a flare where you're having issues with your eye, does that last days? Does it last hours, minutes?
Yeah, for me, it would be from hours to days. And actually, Masa, I started to have a different perspective of what constitute flares after talking to you and some other IgG4-RD patients in our group about their flares. And I was like, oh my gosh, that happens to me. So I think you're a really good person to describe these flares, because I was very naive. And I tried to, for the longest time, stay away from getting a lot of stuff from the internet because, the internet, um, of which we are a part. But
Yeah.
mostly, yeah, I think what you have to say is of so much value for those of us who really don't understand what all a flare might entail.
Thank you. Um, you know, power of social conversation and social discussions, right? Because we learn a lot from each other. It took me a good minute actually to figure out what flares were, right? At first I used to call them episodes. And my episodes were just one of my flares where um when my muculix is acting up, so the multiglandular involvement, lacrimals, parotid, submandibular, and salivary, they tend to act up together, and I would go into these little seizure fits that would last about 5 to 7 minutes, so I would call those my episodes. And later down the line, I came to realize, okay, that's just a type of a flare that I'm having. Um, and when, I say there's different types of flares, it's because personally for me, I have multiple organ involvement. And then I also have two rare diseases that I am, or two diseases that I am at the simultaneously dealing with. So, each of them have their own set of symptoms. Now, when each symptom acts up, I'm having that flare. So if I'm having GI issues, then I would say, oh, my gut today is flaring, and I would get inflammation, indigestion, all kinds of chaos going on. Going to bathroom issues, and that would be one. If I'm having severe just lacrimal involvement, I will have my eyelids kind of drooping, and I will have inflammation all around and a lot of pain. So I'll know that's my eyes that are flaring up. Having autonomic neuropathy and small fiber neuropathy, I will get random itch outbreaks, which last for a very long time, severe tingling, severe numbness. That would be one type of a flare. And then, like you mentioned, the fatigue, right? That for me is a whole other type of flare. So it's all just because it's so many different things involved, and not everything acts up at the same time. That's how I can differentiate what is acting up in that moment. Some of my flares will alleviate within maybe 7 to 10 minutes, depend if it's the glandular. Otherwise, I've had neuropathy itches that last 2 to 3 days. I've had my vasculitis that acts up for a good 24 hours before it calms down. And so this is how I differentiate it, the different types of flares. And also I was able to differentiate it between my relapse phase. So when these symptoms, these flares, they come and go, I say, okay, that's a flare. But if that symptom comes on and then it persists and it lingers and it doesn't go away anymore, I now know, okay, this is my downward spiral of a relapse. Now slowly all of my symptoms are just gonna wake up and add on to it. And I just go through this, paralyzing phase of going down, and then I'll go back for infusions, and then I go back up. It's like an oil change.
Yeah, that is a really good point, is I think the difference between a flare and a relapse is length of time. And I know for me, like it would be an email to my doctor. Is this a flare or a relapse? I mean, like, help me out here. Because I'm lucky enough to have a doctor who knows, and it's a teaching institution. So there are a lot of doctors who are learning about this. So I feel really safe with them. I really love my medical team. Um, but then, explaining to her the list of symptoms versus just the one thing that I was feeling has made a huge difference in her helping me manage my health. So I think that's super important. What do you do when you have a flare?
Hmm.
I mean, sorry, when you have a relapse, excuse me.
Well, I mean, for both, right? So when I clarify that I am in a relapse state, there isn't much I can do except wait for my infusion and make sure that I'm still getting my treatments at the right amount of time. But, even like you said, writing that list to your doctor, something that has helped both me and you, I know we've talked about this, is our symptom tracking, right? So when we daily track our symptoms, we actually end up catching patterns and trends with our own disease, and how our body how the cycle goes, basically.
Oh, yeah. And that is incredibly helpful information to give to your doctors, because your doctors deal in data. And that you can't just sit there. Well, you can, because I'm like, la, 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 my story, la, 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 because my story and my journey is really important to me. But the doctor's like, okay, get to the point. I have 1,000 other patients after you. I'm gonna have a long day, but they're so kind and compassionate and sympathetic. Even if they can't have full empathy, which that's what you really need from a doctor, and curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely love it when I'm able to go in or over the phone or in our portal with my doctors. I'm really happy when we're able to just sit there and discuss things back and forth, because now I've gathered my team to be doctors who are willing to learn, who are willing to listen, who are open to more than one possibility, because that is basically what our disease is that it's multiple different things that can be it's related diseases, right?
Yeah.
multiple different things could fall into our category of disease. And not a lot of doctors are versed on it. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that your doctor is this amazing, and listens to you, because
Yes.
I still deal with a bunch that don't care. And they say, no, it's not related. No, it's not that. And I have to
Yes.
go bring proof again and be like,
And that is one of my personal missions is I want everyone to have the kind of care that I have. And that's hugely important to me. So Mahsa, we've got to conclude. And what would be your takeaway message here?
Actually, I didn't even say what I do to alleviate flares.
Oh, I think
Um,
we could have that be another episode.
Sure, yeah, we'll get into that because I know both you and I, we use a lot of different types of remedies.
Mhm.
Um, so to conclude, flares, they come and go. It will be any symptom that pops up. It will be temporary and it will go down or it will go away. A lot of times if a flare lasts even just a little bit long, you could usually do a course of a tiny bit of medication and it calms it down. Steroidal therapy is always kind of our go-to. But in relapse, now it's time to get back on that infusion if you are receiving infusion, or if that is when you go to steroidal therapy, that's when you want to talk to your doctor immediately. If it lasts more than a week, for me, I already know it's going to be a relapse because it will alleviate in under a week if it's a flare for me.
Yeah. And I think for me too, the takeaway message, in addition to all that you've been saying, is track, 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 track your symptoms. That
Yes.
is going to be key in helping you be a part of your own medical team. That is self-care, and self-love. And I think to caregivers, if you're listening, a way that you can help is if the person you're caring for can't track their symptoms because of the types of flare that they're having, you can track for them. You can help them communicate with their doctor. You are part of the medical care team. And then, of course, to doctors, curiosity, sympathy, compassion, we appreciate that. And yeah. And so with that, I just want to send my love to you all, and I hope everyone stays healthy and feels good or goodish if you can't feel good.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, or happy whatever day you're listening. So,
That's true.
and I just want to remind you to please like, follow, subscribe, share, tell your friends, come join us. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye.